In this lesson, we are going to be working on completing the square. If you would look down under the review, we could solve a quadratic equation by using the quadratic formula, which we did in the last lesson, by doing inverse operations and then doing the square root. Soon we'll be reminding ourselves to do factoring. And then we will today work on completing the square. Now, when we're talking about factoring, which we're going to do again shortly, that if we are doing factors, that's what do we multiply to get our product or our answer when we multiply. When we have a sum factor and a difference factor, we're looking at these being perfect squares. In other words, to the exact same factor twice. So in this example, 3x plus 2 or x minus 4, it would be two of them, and when we write it twice, then we could simplify it to be squared. So our job is to be able to complete the square and then write it in factored form. So remember to do this, we take half of the b value, remember the b is the coefficient of the x, and we square it. So half of 6 is 3, 3 squared is 9. So if we are writing it in factored form, it would be x plus 3, and x plus 3 would be x plus 3, the quantity squared. So x minus 4 squared is x minus 4 times x minus 4. And I'm looking for the c value, which is simply multiplying the last two together. Negative 4 times negative 4 would be 16. Or take half of the b value, which would be negative 4, and then square it, which would be 16. So completing the square and show what the perfect square is, divide the b value by 2, which would be 6, and square it would be 36. This would be x plus 6, the quantity squared. Remember that this number is just the b value divided by 2. 14 divided by 2 is 7. 7 squared is 49. So when we factor it, it's y plus the b value, the quantity squared. Negative 10 divided by 2 is negative 5. Negative 5 squared is positive 25. So this is going to be y minus 5, the quantity squared. All right, so here are the directions for completing the square. The first thing you have to do is move the c to be by itself on the other side of the equation. Take the b and divide it by 2 and square it. Make sure you add that value to both sides. Write one side as a perfect square. Take the square root of both sides and solve. All right, problem number 1. First, we're going to move the c to the other side. And when we do that, we're going to leave a blank from where we moved that value. And if we add a quantity to one side, we add it to the other. Now we take the b value, the negative 6, and divide it by 2, and then we square it. So negative 3 squared is 9, and we add that to both sides. We combine like terms on the right, and we factor the left. Remember, when we factor it, it's the b value divided by 2, and then we square the quantity. Now we take the square root of both sides. A square and a square root cancel. And don't forget your plus or minus. To finish the problem, we get the x by itself, so we're going to add 3 to both sides. So now we have two problems to solve. We have 5 plus 3, and we have negative 5 plus 3. Final solutions will be 8 and negative 2. Let's take a look at the second problem. We're going to add 6 to both sides. We rewrite with the blanks to remind ourselves that we need to be able to complete the square and fill in the blank, and we need to do that to both sides. We take the b, we divide it by 2, and we square it, which would be 4. Now we factor. Remember, this is going to be x plus the v, or with the b value, in this case positive. There will be 2 of them, and we combine like terms. Now we are going to take the square root of both sides. A square and a square root cancel, so we have x plus 2 equals, don't forget your plus or minus, and then the square root of 10. The square root of 10 can't be simplified, so we're going to leave it and simply finish by subtracting 2 from both sides. So we'll write the integer first, and then we put our root after. -2 plus or minus the square root of 10. All right, next example. We're going to subtract 2. First thing we need to do is we need to divide everything by -4. We cannot complete the square until the leading coefficient is 1. Now we're going to add the c to both sides. So we have x squared minus x plus blank equals 1/2 plus blank. Now we take the b and we divide it by 2, so -1 divided by 2 is -1/2, and -1/2 squared would be 1/4, and we add 1/4 to both sides. Now we're going to factor x, and then we do the b value, which is -1/2, and we square it. 1/2 plus 1/4 is 3/4. Then we take the square root of both sides. A square and a square root cancel, so we have x minus 1/2 is equal to plus or minus the square root of 3/4. The square root of 3 cannot be simplified, but the square root of 4 is 2, so this would be plus or minus the square root of 3 over 2. Lastly, we're going to finish by adding 1/2 to both sides. Remember that our 1/2, our integer, will be first, and then we put our root. Some people also would write this as x equals 1 plus or minus the square root of 3 all over 2, because it has a common denominator, but either one will be fine. All right, in our last example, the first thing we're going to do is to divide everything by 5, because we have to have a leading coefficient of 1 in order to complete the square. Now, the c needs to be on the other side, but the b value needs to be with the x squared. So we're going to move both of those together. So we have x squared minus 2x plus blank equals -4 plus blank. Okay, we're going to take the b value, we're going to divide it by 2, and then we're going to square it. -1 squared is 1, so we're going to add 1 to both sides. Now we're going to factor x and the b value, the quantity squared, equals -3. Now we take the square root of both sides. Since we have the square by itself, a square and a square root will cancel, so we have x minus 1 equals plus or minus the square root of -3. Well, remember, the square root of a negative is I, and the square root of 3 does not simplify, so we have plus or minus I square root of 3. We're going to add 1 to both sides to finish solving, so we'll write the real part first, and then we have plus or minus I square root of 3. Please complete the student problems and then submit.